Light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Karen Lewis, and we wanted to address, I suppose, a common but a complex subject, actually, when you look at it, self-criticism. And you were making a comment a moment ago about a connection between this and relationships, how the person speaks of others or speaks to others, or
how they treat others.
How they treat others.
Yes, is often
the words translated into actions even.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, how people treat themselves is a reflection often of how they treat others.
Or vice versa.
And vice versa.
How they treat others is... So, it's probable, we don't know for sure without looking at each individual case, and it would depend upon what the person was willing to confess. But it's reasonable to think that if someone is difficult to be around, they probably aren't very happy with themselves either. But because they want to, because they desire a certain social experience or outcome, they may deny that they really are having any problem.
Well,
the person who yells at me, "I am not angry," and it's like,
right.
Okay, you're not angry. Does anybody believe that? In a similar sort of way. The movie Steel Magnolias.
Yes.
The wonderful character played by Shirley MacLaine of Weezer Boudreaux, and she's describing this angry sort of attitude at one point, and Malin says, if you truly feel this way, Weezer, it ain't healthy. You ought to come down to the center. And Weezer responds, I am not crazy, Malin. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years.
40 years, oh my.
That's the answer that she came up with in that situation. There's probably a lot of people answering in a similar way. At some point, that person needs to look in the mirror and say, I am angry, and I do need to deal with this.
And I would think that a constructive way to deal with that anger, especially when one's looking in the mirror, is, as you say, acknowledging it and deciding what one wants to get, if one truly wants to get beyond that. Sometimes it's very easy to react with anger.
To be a reaction rather than a response.
And yes. Yes. And then compassion would be more of a response, I guess, in that sense.
To focus in specifically on self-criticism, though.
Yes.
This is where we're actually putting the roadblocks in our own way. There is criticism of others toward us, but what we're focusing on in this episode, just scratching the surface as we always do, because we always run out of time, self-criticism. The ways that I look in the mirror and I tell myself that I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve whatever, that I'm not as pretty as people say I am. They're just being nice to me and they're not being honest with me. Maybe they are being honest.
Well, or self-criticism would be saying that to oneself that's important, perhaps.
That's important?
Yes.
That the approval of others is important, or that what's important?
That whatever quality that that they're focusing on is important in this case, whether someone is pretty or not.
I must be the best. I must be beautiful. I must be...
perfect.
I must do it perfect the first time.
Yeah.
Life is about growth and learning and development.
Indeed it is.
You are not loving yourself, in my opinion, if you demand perfection on the first attempt. And if you do not attempt because you are not sure you will achieve perfection. That is also unloving.
Well, and too, there are many different kinds of perfection. I often see my students in my yoga classes working on perfecting a pose by looking at the outer proportions of the pose. How far can I take my head down to my toes, for instance? And that is not a perfect pose, except for someone that has no injuries and is extremely flexible. On the other hand, a perfect pose for each person varies according to where that person's physical body is at that time, and also where their mind is. In my opinion, as a yoga teacher, the awareness of what is going on within oneself, emotionally, physically, and not only in just not even being aware of the outer parts, but the inner portions, create what is a perfect pose. And for each person, that will be different.
So do I understand correctly if I say to be so focused on the inward experience that for a moment, in some way, you're not really even conscious of what form or shape you're taking?
Ideally, yes.
This is perhaps on a little bit of a tangent, but I recall reading about the whirling dervishes, a particular religious sect in the Middle East, where their form of meditation is to whirl, more or less continuously, without getting dizzy.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, an article I read many years ago suggested the reason they were able to do this is because they visualized or became conscious of a constant point of light or being or consciousness within themselves that did not move. And in that sense, the body was kind of like a merry-go-round that spun around the center pole. And the only thing that occupied their consciousness was awareness of the center pole. They were not paying any attention to the body that was spinning around, like the merry-go-round, on its axle. And so that's how they maintained their exact position and didn't get dizzy or fall over, is because the point at which they were looking was not moving. It was simply that the body was moving around it.
And it didn't matter that it was an inner point instead of a physical point outside the body.
Yeah. The point was that they had that a stable point occupied their full consciousness. And so in that sense it became a spiritual discipline of figuring out how to choose to embrace that state or to do that action. As I think a Buddhist source put it, doing by not doing.
In China, yes.
Which I guess brings us back to self-criticism. Getting to a point where you're not self-critical seems to me is doing by not doing.
In many ways it is. It's placing focus, placing awareness outside of oneself. Instead of being hypersensitive, my mom would have hated it if I did things this way, just simply letting that past go and being aware of what is at hand and moving through that, doing that, accomplishing that, focusing only on the task is...
And perhaps accepting that my mom would be upset if I did it this way. I know why I choose to do it this way anyway. My mom might be upset. It's okay with me that my mom would be upset. I know that by being upset, my mother would be in no physical danger. She's simply having an emotional experience. She's entitled to whatever emotional experience she wants to have. I need to choose what's right for me in this moment, and I choose to do something that I know she would not find acceptable.
So you would be at peace with yourself.
Then you would be at peace with yourself.
Which is a type of kindness or compassion towards yourself.
Okay.
And recognizing that others too choose to do things the way that they do because of their particular insights or the ways they choose to do it for whatever reason suits their purpose
Okay.
would be being compassionate towards others.
So the opposite of self-criticism is not self-affirmation. The opposite of self-criticism would more accurately be, well, you said it just a moment ago.
I would say compassion.
Self-compassion rather than self-affirmation. It's not, on one hand, saying, I'm too ugly to do that. The opposite would seem to be, I'm completely beautiful. Somewhere in between the two, you have genuine compassion that says, I am a beautiful and worthy person no matter how I look, because of who I am.
Because of who I am. I'm worthwhile. Move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and do the sorts of things that a beautiful and worthy person does,
Mm-hmm.
instead of, what is now fairly well known, I guess, the rigorous life of professional fashion models. The restrictions on diet and exercise and having to maintain this external appearance, instead of allowing to simply be whoever and whatever they find themselves to be.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's their job is to be a certain specifically defined ideal of beauty, and everything in their day revolves around maintaining that definition.
Yes, and
any time they don't, they become self-critical.
True. Or society criticizes them because they're not living up to the ideals that they would project, or the photographer has to do a lot of work to airbrush things and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, they say that, for instance, in this particular topic, often people who are beautiful have all kinds of even crippling or serious allergies, conditions, and so forth. And
it's kind of their body rebelling against the imposition of artificial extremes of beauty?
I don't know. I haven't heard about that perception.
Okay.
But
just a speculation. I wondered if that might be the explanation, but maybe it's not.
They say that what makes a woman beautiful is ideal proportions and so forth, and it's supposed to do with fertility and healthiness. A very healthy person is going to be a beautiful person, but it's not often true. It's simply a convention, just as with
exactly.
a weightlifter.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You have to remember that the definition of ideal, it changes from one age to the next.
One generation, one place. Exactly.
Watch the old Superman movies. And George Reeves? I remember many years ago seeing this old black and white show called Superman.
Mm-hmm.
The guy, in my humble opinion, no offense intended, just being descriptive, the guy looks 20 or 30 pounds overweight. He's not athletic. He doesn't have muscle definition. He's a late 40s man in a spandex suit. When they redid Superman in the 1980s, 70s, I can't remember exactly which decade it was now, but with Christopher Reeves. Curious that same last name, but he was athletic.
Mm-hmm.
He was young. He looked a lot more like the comic book version. It was simply that the definition of ideal that changed.
Well, and they continue to change.
Snow White in the fairy tales.
Yes.
The reason she was called Snow White is because white skin was perceived to be characteristic of nobility. People who did not work out in the fields, who did not get suntans, whose skin remained absolutely white because they hadn't been exposed to any of the conditions that create tan skin.
Indeed.
You know, the shifting societal conventions.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere in the midst of all that, we have this, I guess all of us have this continual struggle over self-criticism.
Well, with...
Am I good enough?
Right. Or, as you were saying, am I beautiful enough? That is something else that's changed. The society has become so much outwardly focused, and it has become destructive. There's so many people that go around saying, am I presentable enough to go out into public, you know? And it used to be that people, you know, did indeed have standards of beauty, but, you know, they knew whether they met them or not, and they went on with their lives. With the way things are advertised in the modern world, no human could actually hold up without airbrushing and so forth, modification to the ideals that we hold.
Editing.
Yes, it's simply not possible. And
the fact that if it's not possible, that leads me to the question of whether what does result is in fact in our best interest. You know, looking for the positive results or positive consequences, positive rewards of whatever the real result is. You know, that I mean, in one sense, I could be sounding very Pollyannish at the present time, saying, well, look on the bright side. It's not that we need to deny the dark side. We just need to remember the dark side is not all there is.
Yes, and to accept oneself for what one is now at this point. And if we have ideals, if we have goals that we're striving to achieve, to know that it's okay that we're not there today and we won't be there in the next minute, but that it is a process, and that's part of being human, and all around us, others are doing that as well. So being compassionate with oneself and with the others around them.
So the opposite of self-criticism then is compassion.
I think so, because
you know, and when we say compassion, we're not talking about sympathy, we're not talking about pity.
No.
We're not even necessarily talking about empathy. Compassion stands alone as this distinct sort of responsiveness.
It's nonviolent, it is kind, it is aware.
It is which?
Nonviolent, kind, and aware.
And aware. I agree completely with that. I think what I would add is that it's active.
I like that.
It's a response. It is not being ambivalent or apathetic to what's going on. Compassion is willing to get its hands dirty.
It's not coasting on old momentum.
And it's not waiting for somebody else to fix it.
Right.
I joked with someone once, you know, if we could teach the whole world love and compassion, how events in society would play out differently. And I thought, yeah, just imagine you're in rush hour traffic on the highway and there's an accident. And everybody gets out to help. Every single car stops, everybody gets out, and everybody comes over to see what they can do. And we don't have to wait for a crane to come lift the vehicles apart. The people just, you know, 40 people grab around this car and tip it up right, or, you know, whatever. I mean, obviously it's a case-by-case basis. Somewhere in that group there's probably going to be a nurse and a doctor who are on their way to work or off duty or something. But the point being, everybody stops, everybody cares, everybody's there for everybody.
Yes.
Instead of asking who got hurt, to simply recognize that if anyone got hurt, I will be there to do what I can, and if there's nothing we can do, we will join hands and form a prayer circle around the accident and put as much loving, healing, positive energy as we can around that, so that even if it turns out to be a fatal accident, we will be the first line of response, encouraging this person's spirit to find peace and have a beautiful transition to their heavenly home.
I think the biggest benefits, though, of having that compassion for oneself and for one others is in very, very subtle ways in everyday life, with the people in one's everyday life, within one's family, and within strangers alike. One can have, it's a very subtle quality when someone is being kind, when one is questioning someone's actions, someone's behavior. If
That
one's
it's
doing
not,
it with
it's
kindness,
not only the big things, it's also the little
compassion.
moments that fill every day of our lives.
Yes, those little moments and the kindness, the compassion, being aware in those situations entirely change the quality
What
of
pops into
life.
my mind suddenly as you're talking, when we say fill every day of our lives, that self-criticism, I think, is also what makes a lot of people nervous about impending closure, about death. That they have so much self-criticism waiting there, they are quite certain that it couldn't possibly have been a good enough person. And I usually encourage them to focus on the love instead. You know, every loving moment you experienced, every time you help someone, to bring all those things to the fore. Instead of allowing self-criticism to be the thing that denies you the love you need in your final hours. Because I believe it's that love that you surround the person's spirit with that gives them the wings they need to fly to their hopefully positive eternal destiny.
Criticism implies a judgment, and it seems that when people are spending time making a judgment, they're focusing on the negative instead of simply responding to what is there and trying to bring that into some kind of good resolution, something that is helpful and healing for the situation, for all the people that are involved.
So, as we're starting to wind down the show, we've looked at this from a lot of different angles. There's a lot of different facets, and of course there are many ways for it to manifest as there are people. Is self-criticism ever a good thing?
That's a good question, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so for most people. We have so much self-criticism as a negative thing. I'm not good enough, and it prevents the negative judgment. It keeps
Maybe
one
at this point
from
it's
accomplishing
important to
things, and
distinguish.
perfection is so rare.
Okay.
Distinguish?
To distinguish between self-criticism and self-critique.
Okay. Yes, big difference. Yeah.
Self-critique
Self-critiquing
is measuring.
Yeah, what can I do to be better next time? Not, oh my gosh, I'm hopeless because I didn't do that right. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to
for-
10, how well do I think I did?
For instance.
You know,
Yeah.
this time I did a 5, next time I'll reach for a 6. You know, or
These are the
whatever
things that I did
corollary
well.
you want to
These
give
are
it.
the things that can be improved upon. But holding the positive as well as where one's goals are.
Which a critique is not a good critique unless it tells you where you can grow.
It has to be honest and complete, both positive and the negative and everything. Yeah.
Honest and complete, but I guess most importantly to me it has to be empowering. It has to give an invitation to growth or improvement or reconstruction or something. A critique that offers no way for improvement, no opportunity for advancement, no better version next time.
There are good critiques and bad critiques.
So I would call that a bad critique, an ineffective, unhelpful, adversarial critique.
Yes.
And what we need to be for each other, what we need to recommend, is the positive, empowering critiques. The ones that say, I was here, I did my best, next time I will try to do even better.
Critiquing oneself is fairly safe. One lives with consequences of one's words, as it were, evaluation, I should say. However, critiquing others would require, to do it with as positive as result, would require the openness and awareness that that particular person could accept. And very few people are open to being critiqued by outsiders except under certain circumstances.
Was there something more you wanted to say?
Well, it's just there's so much. I mean, that can be perceived by someone without one's intending it to,
Okay.
giving a critique. So that's something one would want to be aware of. When would one like to critique someone? You know, it's looking within oneself
Well, and on that
first
note,
before.
it's probably important to ask why you want to do the critique. You know, in the same way that I generally don't go looking in my bathroom mirror for no reason. Usually I'm brushing my teeth, I'm combing my hair, I'm doing something. There's a reason, an interaction, a relationship, a purpose for that mirror being there. And if I never paid attention to what its reflection told me, the mirror could go away and it wouldn't make any difference in my life.
And so many people hold up an internal mirror to themselves that is very, very precise and unrealistic. You know, too unrealistic for everyday life and for their own health.
Final thought as we wrap up? That was it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, and thank all of you for watching.